but how many people were scared of her and did not really fight her?
For this video, we're focusing in on the most brutal knockouts on the women's side of combat sports. And trust us, there are some truly violent finishes in here, folks. To kick things off, quite literally, we go to the world of amateur MMA, where this high-paced showdown took a violent turn when an expertly timed head kick put this fighter's lights out. Everything about this shot was perfect. The setup, the angle she created, the power. And when the shot eventually landed, there was absolutely no chance of survival. A 10 out of 10 KO for sure. You'll notice a few future greats in this video. And for this entry, we have an early knockout in the career of the legendary Valentina Shevchenko. And it doesn't matter who's watching, that spinning back kick to the body is just about as painful looking a strike as you could ever hope to see. Shevchenko had all the makings of a future champion, and she was very clearly showing her potential from the earliest stages of her career. Look, if you're not convinced already, I don't know what else to do, because we're bringing you some A-level kicking here, and this knockout moment had one hell of an impact. It was almost like a baseball bat to the face, and the way the victim stiffened and fell to the mat? Yeah, this was almost hard to watch. The body language was all off for this one. Coming into the end of the second round here, it seemed like one of these women was the far fresher of the two, and that stamina difference allowed her to pile on the pressure, eventually trapping her target up against the cage. And when that happened, she began to unload a barrage of shots that put her adversary right down on the canvas. This next one was all about the timing and the distance control. When you have a head kick like this in your arsenal, you don't necessarily need to wind up and throw it with mean intentions. This kick was powerful, sure, but there was a level of finesse on display here, and it was the timing and the speed of the shot that really set this one up. The resulting KO? A thing of total beauty. But from a thing of total beauty, we go to something truly ugly. In fact, this fight probably never should have happened. Who knows what caused this very regular-looking woman to step into the MMA cage with an actual athlete, but the way she fought, it made her look like she was totally out of her depth. And when the initial strike that knocked her down landed, the follow-up shot was probably a bit unnecessary. But if one thing is certain, it's that this woman learned a valuable lesson on this day about the levels that exist within the fight game. We go to some vintage Holly Holm next, a pre-UFC showcase for the preacher's daughter that saw her score an early viral knockout. And if you're looking for a hint at what would eventually follow, look no further than this stunning head kick KO. In fact, this knockout looked eerily similar to the one that she would eventually use to earn her first taste of UFC gold by KOing the great Ronda Rousey. Maybe we really should have seen it coming. Speaking of eerily familiar KOs, how about this early knockout sequence from the future two-time UFC strawweight champion Zhang Weili? This style of relentless work in the clinch will be very familiar to anyone who watched her utterly destroy Jessica Andrade to win her first 115-pound title. And that's more or less the style of offense we saw here. Just a total demolition job from one of the most unmissable fighters in women's MMA history. This next one looked like a pretty evenly contested back-and-forth affair, as these two fighters threw caution to the wind and engaged in a fiercely contested slugfest. But despite one of these women looking as if she was about to fall behind, an excellent counter right hook saw her use her opponent's forward momentum against her, catching her clean on the chin as she moved in to land her own punch. The perfect intercepting shot. We've featured a lot of kicking so far, but as you can see, we're moving into the fearsome punchers now. And this barrage was thrown with murderous intent. At least a dozen punches were thrown before that one pivotal land that put her down on the canvas. But all in all, this was a true display of power within women's MMA, and a worthy addition to our video. Up next, we have a series of clinch attacks that even the great Zhang Weili would be proud of. This was a real mismatch from a physical perspective, and once this fighter had her opponent up against the cage, she was basically able to do whatever she wanted to her. And that's when the massive knees started flooding in. And eventually, when the body crumbled, the elbows upstairs were enough to close the show entirely. A dynamic but truly painful-looking piece of KO action. We've had a few great KOs with the hands so far, but this one-hitter quitter is definitely on another level entirely. You really do need a tremendous amount of physical strength to deliver an overhand punch with this amount of force. And when it landed, that was pretty much game over. No follow-up shots needed. Another absolutely electric head kick comes in next. If you're a good enough technician on the feet, you don't need a massive gap to find home for a shot like this. And boy, did she not need much of an opening to strike. When that head kick landed, it was pretty clear that the fight was over. As clean a connection as you'll ever see. This next one could have very easily been stopped about 10 seconds before it eventually did. Sure, the target was making some efforts to try and put some distance between herself and her incoming attacker, but it wasn't working. And with a barrage of strikes like this, there was only ever going to be one outcome. It just took the referee a little too much time to see it clearly. We've definitely witnessed more powerful punches in this video, but this might be the cleanest display of boxing so far. And it was a beautifully timed hook that set up this fighter for her eventual fall. Once she was dazed, it didn't take long for her opponent to step on the gas, and eventually, she managed to find her target's off switch and end her night right then and there. Clean work. Of that, there can be little doubt. This next one illustrates just how badly things can go when you charge in recklessly for the kill. Even if you appear to have the advantage in any given situation, things can always take a turn for the ugly if you meet an opponent who can counter you as effectively as this woman could. And it turned the tide in her favor instantly. From a bad position to getting her hand raised in victory, this was one hell of a way to make a statement. Some KOs just pass the eye test, and this was one of them. This one-shot knockout folded its target where she stood, so much so that she almost flopped to the mat upon impact. There's a sweet spot on the chin that, when you land on it, can send your opponent directly to the shadow realm. And that's exactly what we saw here. This one was a classic case of overkill. The partially blocked head kick that started this sequence off was enough to make the referee take a very good look at one of these fighters. But those two follow-up punches, they were all kinds of brutal. A violent finish and one hell of a way to take home the win. This next one was actually quite similar to the last one. The head kick here was perfect, a blistering shot that immediately stiffened this fighter up. But before she could even fall to the ground for the KO loss, her opponent was already jumping in to close the show. Not really a late stoppage, because it all happened so fast. But man, that's gotta hurt. This knockout is without question the most impressive so far. With our videos, we always guarantee that we'll keep you entertained the more you watch. Well, in this case, we were saving one of the best knockouts for the second half. The athletic ability here was truly insane, and the connection she managed to make on her opponent's chin was awe-inspiring. You could watch 1,000 MMA fights and not see a knockout better than this one. A special KO. Of that, there can be little doubt. We go to the kickboxing ring next for a knockout that serves as a worthy follow-up to the last one. This was the type of kick that most fighters wouldn't even attempt. A jumping switch kick that wasn't too far off a crane kick by the looks of it. But as soon as this Yair Rodriguez-like shot landed, her opponent was out cold. A highlight for the ages. Yeah, this video's hitting a real stride now. We're keeping our momentum going with one hell of a knockout that quite literally came out of nowhere. Her opponent was being a little reckless with her offense, not leaving too much room for defense. And when the opening was there, she capitalized with an expertly timed spinning back fist that found its mark perfectly. Another 10 out of 10 connection. There was no getting up from that one. If you're not convinced of this video's greatness just yet, how about maybe the single most powerful knockout in the history of women's boxing? Ann Wolfe is a truly deadly puncher who could knock out anyone with the right shot. And in taking her opponent there, she gave up a pretty massive reach deficit. But when she was able to close the distance, land her best punch, the overhand, it was good night Irene. A jaw-droppingly good one-punch KO. We go back to MMA next for a two-shot finishing sequence that was nearly too good to be true. After stiffening up her opponent with a head kick, the referee could have gotten in a little quicker to save this fighter from her impending doom. But unfortunately, he couldn't close the distance in time, and the follow-up punch was one that sent an electrical current through its target. A brutal fight-ending combo that could have had potentially career-altering consequences. A knockout loss that can change a fighter's chin forever, for sure. Speed kills. And when speed is combined with power, you end up with a knockout like this one. We go back to the boxing ring for this final entry, and trust me, it does not disappoint. This fight-ending combo was thrown with a level of accuracy and ferocity that was always going to result in a knockout. And sure enough, this lightning-fast blitz left her opponent totally out of it, unable to continue. One hell of a way to end a video, right?